She saw every inch of him, and the Alpha King, the most feared man in 7 kingdoms, saw her see it. What Bella did in the next 3 seconds should have ended her life. What he did instead shattered a rule no king had ever broken and set in motion something neither of them could stop. But the real danger was what he carried on his skin, a secret so devastating that everyone who'd ever glimpsed it had been erased. And Bella Valdis, invisible servant, had just walked straight into the middle of it. She was going to be whipped for being late. That was the only thought in Bella's head as she moved, not quite running, because running drew attention, so it was that awkward half-walk, half-sprint, the gait of someone who knew exactly how much trouble they were in and refused to show it. The freshly pressed linens were tucked under her arm, still warm from the iron, and she had 3 minutes, maybe 2, before Steward Orath made his final round of the guest corridor and found the chamber unserviced. Orath had whipped girls for less. She'd watched it happen, so she'd learned to be faster. The east wing of the palace was empty at this hour. Wall sconces burned to their lowest. Bella's shadow stretched long and thin across the stone. She counted doors the way she'd been taught. Iron bracket, 2 paces, carved beam, 1 pace, 3rd door. She was counting wrong. She knew that later. In the moment, she was only counting fast. The handle turned. The door swung inward, silent, expensive, well-oiled, and a wall of cedar-scented steam hit her full in the face. She stepped inside before her mind caught up with her body. The bathing chamber was enormous, lit by a bank of candles that turned the steam to amber. A copper tub dominated the center of the room, deep enough to drown in, and the man inside it had gone absolutely, completely, dangerously still. She took in everything in 1 helpless second. The breadth of his shoulders above the waterline, network of scars across his muscular chest, and there, burned into the left side of his ribcage, a mark she recognized with a lurch of pure animal terror, a mark that was impossible, because the rite had been outlawed for 2 centuries. It meant that everything, the wars, the commands, the silence around the eastern borders, had not been his. The linens hit the floor. She spun for the door. Don't. 1 word. Quiet as a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. She felt it in her spine. Bella stopped. Every nerve in her body screamed to run, but she did not, because the voice behind her belonged to Blake Ashbourne, Alpha King of the Valdenmere, the man whose name made border lords piss themselves and court ladies ruin their silk with fantasies they'd never admit in daylight. The water shifted. She heard him rise. Turn around. She turned around. He stood on the top step, unashamed, water still sheeting off him in slow, glittering trails. He hadn't reached for anything to cover himself. He simply stood there, staring at her with eyes that were the shade of a storm cloud meeting sea, flat, cold, and terrifyingly focused. Bella locked her eyes on his face and refused to let them drop. She would not become another breathless court lady whispering about the king's endowments. Even so, her gaze naturally wanted to slide down the long line of his throat, the taut plane of his stomach, lower still. She clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. Eyes up. Eyes up. You've seen it, he said, not about his nakedness, but the mark pulsing on his ribs. Still, the words landed like they meant both. Bella's mouth was bone dry. The smart answer was, I don't know what you mean. The safe answer was to drop to her knees and beg. Blake stepped out of the tub, reached for the linen cloth folded on the rack beside it, unhurried, almost leisurely, and wrapped it around his waist. Then he walked toward her, and Bella held her ground through sheer stubbornness, because she'd learned long ago that the moment you backed away from a predator, you became prey. He stopped close enough that she could see the water still running down his throat. Do you know what I'm required to do? He said quietly. To a servant who has seen that mark? Her heart was beating so frantically she was certain he could hear it. Yes, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "What is your name?" Of every response she'd expected, and she had cycled through all of them in the last 30 seconds, that was not one of them. "Bella," she said. "Bella Valdis." Something moved across his face. There and gone, too fast to name. He took one slow breath. "Bella Valdis," he repeated. "Go back to your quarters. Tell no one what you saw. Lock your door." He turned away from her, back toward the tub, as though the matter were settled. "And come back tomorrow night at the same hour." She stared at his back, at the mark, at the evidence burned into a king's body that should have toppled his entire reign. "Why?" she asked, before she could stop herself. He didn't turn around, but the silence that followed her question stretched long enough that Bella felt it settle into her bones. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost conversational, as though they were discussing the weather instead of treason. "Because I need to know how much you understand about what you just saw." A muscle flexed along his jaw. "Now go." Bella slipped out of the bathing chamber, the heavy door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Her legs moved on instinct, quick, quiet steps down the dim corridor, past the dying sconces, past the carved beam she'd miscounted. The linens she'd dropped were still on the marble floor behind her, forgotten like a shed skin. She didn't dare go back for them. Every footfall sounded too loud to her own ears. By the time she reached the servant's stair, her pulse had settled into something steadier, but no less frantic. She pressed her back to the cold stone for a single breath, then forced herself onward. Mavis was waiting in their shared attic room, curled on the narrow cot with a stolen candle stub burning low. The laundry maid's dark curls spilled over the pillow, and she cracked one eye open the moment Bella's shadow crossed the threshold. "You're late," Mavis said, voice thick with sleep. "Oreth's going to string you up by your braids tomorrow." Bella shut the door, leaned against it, and let out a shaky laugh that sounded more like a sob. "He can try." Mavis sat up, blanket pooling around her waist. The candlelight caught the faint scar across her cheek, courtesy of a hot iron and a moment of clumsiness 2 winters ago. She studied Bella's face, then narrowed her eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Or worse, a naked one." Bella's throat closed. She dropped onto the edge of the cot and buried her face in her hands. His cedar scent still clung to her skin, stubborn and intimate. She could still see the mark on his ribs, the jagged spiral of blackened silver, edges raised like old burn tissue, pulsing faintly as though it had its own heartbeat. "No jokes tonight," she whispered. Mavis scooted closer, shoulder bumping hers. "Then tell me what happened." Bella lifted her head. "I opened the wrong door." Mavis waited. When Bella didn't elaborate, she nudged harder. And I saw something I can't unsee." Bella's voice cracked on the last word. "Something that could get me killed before breakfast." Mavis didn't flinch. She never did. Instead, she reached under the cot, pulled out the small flask of watered wine they shared on bad nights, and pressed it into Bella's hands. "Drink, then talk, or don't. But you're not sleeping like this." Bella took a swallow. The wine burned going down, grounding her. Finally, Mavis spoke again, softer. "Whatever you saw tonight, it's bigger than a bad shift, isn't it?" Bella looked down at their joined hands. "Yeah. Big enough to get you killed? Big enough to get a lot of people killed." Mavis nodded once, slow and resigned. Then she tugged the blanket higher around them both. "Get some sleep," she said. "And Bella, if anyone hurts you, I'll burn this whole wing down to get to you. I know people in the laundry who know people with pitch and lamp oil." Bella huffed a quiet laugh. "Noted." Mavis blew out the candle, plunging them into darkness, and tugged the blanket over both of them like she had 100 times before. Bella lay awake long after Mavis's breathing evened out, staring at the slanted ceiling beams, replaying the king's voice in her mind. Because I need to know how much you understand about what you just saw. She understood enough to know the mark shouldn't exist. The blood rite had been forbidden since her grandmother's time, declared an abomination by the old council because it demanded a willing sacrifice from the royal bloodline itself, a life for the land. And if the king bore that mark? Bella pressed her palm to her chest, feeling the faint, steady thrum she'd always carried there. The same thrum her mother used to soothe fevers with a touch. The same thrum that had gotten her mother hanged. She closed her eyes. Would she live to see past tomorrow? The next evening arrived cold and moonless. Bella moved through the palace like a shadow, avoiding the main corridors, sticking to the servants' passages where the air smelled of damp stone and old straw. She'd changed into her plainest shift, nothing to mark her as anything but another faceless girl, and braided her hair tight against her scalp. No jewelry, no scent of lavender. Invisible. The east wing felt different tonight, quieter, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. She reached the bathing chamber door at the appointed hour, took a deep breath, then pushed it open. The room was dimmer than before. Only a single bank of candles burned, casting long shadows across the marble. The copper tub stood empty, water drained, surface still rippling faintly from recent use. Steam lingered in thin wisps near the ceiling. Blake waited on the far side of the room, dressed this time, black tunic, dark leathers, boots polished to a dull gleam. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, watching her enter like a wolf marking the arrival of prey that had chosen to walk into the den. He didn't speak until the door clicked shut behind her. You came. Bella lifted her chin. You made it clear I didn't have a choice. A faint curve touched the corner of his mouth. Most would have run, packed a bag, slipped out a side gate before dawn. I'm not most, Your Majesty. He studied her for a long moment, amber eyes unreadable in the low light. Then he pushed off the wall and crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped just out of arm's reach. Show me your hands. Bella hesitated, then extended them, palms up. No tremble, at least not visibly. He took one wrist, his grip firm but careful, thumb resting over her pulse. She felt the heat of him through the thin fabric of her sleeve, felt the faint tremor in his own fingers before he masked it. You're not shaking, he observed. I save that for when I'm alone. Something flickered in his gaze. Respect, maybe. He released her wrist but didn't step back. Tell me what you saw last night, he said. Exactly. Bella met his gaze without flinching. A man in a bath, scars from battles I've only heard stories about, and a mark on his ribs that shouldn't exist anymore. His eyes narrowed. And what do you think that mark means? She chose her words with care. It means someone paid a price the kingdom wasn't supposed to ask for. A price in blood. The kind of price that gets people executed for even knowing the shape of it. Silence stretched. He didn't move, but she felt the shift in him, the wary calculation of a man who'd spent years guarding a secret that could end him. You speak carefully, he observed, like someone who's learned the cost of careless words. I had a very good teacher. She didn't survive the lesson, Your Majesty. Then tell me this. Do you know why the rite was outlawed? Bella hesitated. Because it demanded a life from the royal line itself, a willing sacrifice. The land would drink it and grow strong again, but the cost was too high. Too personal. His jaw tightened. And if I told you the rite was performed anyway, in secret, when the wars were ending and the realm was starving? She swallowed. Then I'd say the man wearing the mark carries more than scars. He watched her for another long beat, then nodded once, as though she'd passed some invisible test. His hands moved to his laces. Bella's breath caught, What are you— I need to know, he said quietly, fingers working without hurry. If you'll flinch when you see it again. Or if you'll run. He pulled his tunic open to the waist, the mark exposed in the candlelight. Black silver lines coiled across his ribs like living ink, faint red veins threading outward like frost cracks on glass. The corruption was visible even to untrained eyes. Bella's breath caught, not from fear, but from the sudden visceral awareness of how close he was. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin, to catch the faint scent of cedar oil and something wilder beneath it. Her gaze traced the mark despite herself, lingering on the way the lines seemed to pulse in time with his breathing. You're not flinching, he said quietly. His eyes darkened, something raw flickering there before he shuttered it. He lifted one hand slowly, giving her time to step back, and brushed his fingertips over the edge of the spiral, almost absently. How long? She asked, voice softer than she intended. Since I was 10. His words came out practiced, like he'd played back this memory countless times. The blood wars were ending. The land was dying, crops blackening, rivers running red. The council needed a miracle. They chose my mother, and she chose me. Bella's stomach twisted. She sacrificed herself? She smiled when they bound her to the altar. He traced the mark again, slower this time. Told me the land would remember kindness, even if men forgot. Bella felt his words ripple through her chest, stirring the old ache she kept buried. I'm sorry, she whispered. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not as a servant, not as a threat, but as someone who understood the weight of a mother's last gift. Silence stretched between them, thick with shared grief and something sharper. Bella's fingers itched to reach out, to trace the mark the way he had, to see if her mother's gift could soothe even this. She curled them into fists instead. Why let me live? She asked. Blake's gaze dropped to her mouth for the barest second, then returned to her eyes. When you looked at me last night, you didn't flinch. Not from the scars, not from the mark, not from me. Heat crawled up her throat, but she forced her voice steady. That doesn't answer my question. It does for me. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and pine and the faint metallic edge of whatever magic still clung to him. His voice dropped. I need someone who can look at this thing every night and not run screaming. Someone who might know how to stop it before it kills me and takes the kingdom with it. Bella's heart stuttered. You're dying? Blake's gaze held hers, steady but shadowed. The mark is rotting from the inside. The land feels it. Borders are failing. Monsters are slipping through where the magic thins. If it finishes me, the binding unravels completely. Everything I've held together since I was a boy comes apart. He paused. I've been searching for a way to break it for years. Alone. She searched his face, saw the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried the weight of a realm that had already taken too much. And if I help you? She asked. You stay alive, protected. He took half a step closer, the space between them shrinking until she could feel the warmth rolling off him again. When it's over, when the mark is gone, and the land is stable again, I get you out. North to the free clans, south to the coast, wherever you want to disappear to. No questions. Bella let out a slow breath. And if I can't help? His jaw tightened. Then we both go down with it. She looked back at the mark on his ribs, the black silver spiral, the faint red veins creeping outward like roots seeking water. The old thrum in her chest stirred, insistent, like a memory trying to surface. Her mother's voice whispered at the edge of her mind. I'll need to touch it, she said, to understand how deep the corruption runs. Blake nodded once, slow and deliberate. Then touch it. She lifted her hand slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her fingertips brushed the raised edge of the spiral, warm skin over something unnaturally cool beneath. The contact was electric, not pain, but a jolt that traveled up her arm and settled behind her ribs. Visions flickered behind her eyes. A boy no older than 10 screaming on a stone altar, a woman's gentle hand stroking his hair as she sang a final lullaby. Fields blackening overnight, rivers running thick and red, a wolf howling in a cage forged from its own ribs, golden eyes wild with trapped fury. Bella gasped, yanked her hand back. Blake steadied her without thinking, fingers closing around her elbow. "What did you see?" "Your mother." Bella's voice came out hushed. "And the land screaming." He went very still. "You saw her?" "She was singing." Bella swallowed. "The same song my mother used to sing when I was sick." The air between them thickened. Blake's grip on her elbow tightened. His thumb brushed the inside of her arm in an unconscious rhythm, as though soothing them both. "Then you know more than most," he murmured. "More than I've let anyone know." Bella searched his face and found no mask there, only exhaustion, grief, and something warmer flickering at the edges. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said instead, "and the night after, until we figure it out." He studied her for a long moment, thumb still moving in that absent, soothing rhythm. Then, almost reluctantly, he released her wrist. "Lock your door tonight," he said quietly, "and don't tell anyone." "I won't." He stepped back half a pace, enough to breathe, but not enough to break the tension humming between them. His eyes stayed on hers, warm in a way that made her chest ache. "Bella Valdis." He said her name like he was tasting it for the first time. "Thank you." She turned for the door before the flush climbing her throat could betray her, but as her fingers closed around the handle, she paused. "One more thing," she said without turning. "When we're alone, call me Bella. Just Bella. Only if you call me Blake." She glanced over her shoulder. He stood right behind her now, close enough that she could feel the heat of him at her back again. His eyes were steady, almost challenging. "Deal," she whispered. His mouth curved, just the barest hint of a smile, private and fleeting. "Good night, Bella." She slipped into the corridor, heart pounding, the echo of his touch still burning on her wrist, and his voice curling low in her ear. The nights that followed blurred into a quiet, dangerous rhythm. Bella moved through the palace like a ghost in the hours when most slept, slipping past snoring guards and flickering sconces, her plain shift blending into the shadows. Each evening she braided her hair tighter and carried nothing but the small satchel of salves and dried herbs she'd begun assembling, things Mavis had quietly pressed into her hands without asking questions. "For whatever trouble you're not telling me about," Mavis had said, voice light but eyes serious. "And if you need me to burn something down, just say the word." Bella never said the word, but the weight of the secret grew heavier each night. The bathing chamber became their sanctuary and their cage. The copper tub stood empty most evenings now. Blake met her fully clothed, tunic open only enough for her to work. The first few nights were careful. Bella traced the mark's edges with oiled fingertips, noting the way the red veins had lengthened since the previous evening, the faint heat that rose beneath the surface like fever under skin. Blake stood still, breath steady, though she felt the tension in him, the way his muscles locked when her fingers brushed a particularly sensitive line, the low rumble in his chest that wasn't quite a growl. She learned his body the way a healer learns a wound, methodically, respectfully, but with an awareness that grew sharper each time. The scar that curved along his left collarbone from a border skirmish years ago, the faint tremor in his left hand when the corruption flared, the way his breath hitched, not from pain, but from something else, when she pressed her palm flat over the spiral and let the thrum in her chest answer it. "You're pushing too hard," she said on the fourth night, frowning at a new thread of crimson that snaked toward his sternum. "Whatever you're doing during the day, training, counsel, whatever it is, it's feeding the corruption." Blake's voice came low. "I can't stop. The court watches for weakness. If I falter, they circle. Then falter less visibly." She pressed harder, channeling the thrum through her palms. A soft glow, barely perceptible, spread beneath her fingers, easing the angry red for a moment. "You're not invincible, Blake." He exhaled sharply at the sound of his name on her lips. His hand came up, covering hers where it rested over the mark. His thumb traced the edge of her wrist, that familiar rhythm she was starting to crave. "You say my name like it's a weapon," he murmured. "It's not." She met his eyes. "Not when we're here." His gaze darkened, pupils expanding until only a thin ring of amber remained. For a heartbeat, she thought he might close the distance between them. Instead, he released her hand and leaned back, breaking the contact first. "Tell me about who taught you all this," he said quietly. Bella hesitated. Talking about her mother felt like opening a vein. Still, she wanted to be honest with him. "My mother was a healer in the border villages, not the kind who brewed teas and set bones, the kind who could lay hands on a dying child and pull the fever out like thread from cloth. The thrum..." She touched her chest. It was stronger in her. Blake watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Did they hang her for it?" "Yes." Bella's voice stayed even. The order against blood magic was absolute, even healing, even saving lives. He closed his eyes briefly. "I should have blocked that order when I was 14. I didn't know what it would cost people like her." Bella felt the old anger rise and then subside. "I don't hate you for it," she said softly. "I hate what the kingdom became, what it forced good people to do." Blake opened his eyes. "And yet you're here, helping the man who could have stopped it. Because you're trying to undo it." She leaned forward, just enough that their knees brushed. "Because I see the boy who lost his mother to save a dying land, and I think, maybe that boy is worth saving." His breath caught. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips lingered against her cheek, warm and careful. "You're dangerous, Bella Valdis," he murmured. "More dangerous than you know." She didn't pull away. "So are you, Blake Ashbourne." The moment stretched, taut and trembling. Then he dropped his hand and stood, putting deliberate distance between them. "Tomorrow," he said. "Same time." She nodded, throat too tight to speak, and left before either of them could cross the line. Bella barely had the attic door shut behind her before Mavis, already perched cross-legged on the cot like a smug cat, pounced. "Sweet Mother Moon, look at you." Mavis's grin split wide. "You're glowing like someone just handed you the moon on a stick and told you to lick it." Bella dropped onto the cot, cheeks flaming. "Shut up." "No chance." Mavis leaned in, eyes sparkling. Lips red from biting, hair falling out of that tragic braid like it's trying to escape. Spill, or I start guessing loudly. Was it the stable boy? The one with the dimples? Or, wait. Her brows shot up theatrically. "Did you finally bed the cook? I always said he had hands made for kneading more than dough." Bella shoved her shoulder, fighting a laugh. "It's not like that. It's complicated." "Love usually is." Mavis softened and reached for Bella's hand. She turned it palm up, thumb brushing over the faint tremor. "You deserve to be wanted, Bella. Not tolerated. Not used. Wanted. So if someone up there in the fancy corridors is finally seeing you, don't shove it away because it's scary. Bella swallowed hard. It could get me killed. Mavis snorted. Everything worth having could, but dying warm in someone's arms? Way better than freezing alone with nothing but regrets and Orath's whip scars. The words hit soft and true. Bella leaned her head on Mavis's shoulder, breathing in soap and starch and the faint sweetness of stolen honey cakes Mavis always tucked in her apron. I brought you something, she murmured, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a small clay jar of salve, the last of her mother's recipe. For your hand. The burn from the iron last week. Mavis's teasing grin faded into something softer. She took the jar like it was made of glass, thumb stroking the lid. You don't have to keep making this for me. I want to. Bella's voice cracked just a little. You're the only one who's ever made this place feel like it could be home. Mavis's eyes went suspiciously bright. She set the jar down very carefully, then yanked Bella into a fierce, quick hug, arms tight, chin digging into Bella's shoulder. You big softy, Mavis muttered, against her hair. Now go to sleep before I start crying properly and ruin my reputation as the toughest woman in the servants' wing. Bella lay down beside her, but sleep didn't come easy, because Mavis was right. She was glowing, and the person making her glow was dangerous enough to burn them both alive. But God's help her, Bella was already reaching for the flame. The 8th night brought the first true glimpse of terror. When Bella pushed the bathing chamber door open, she found Blake on the floor, curled on his side, body convulsing in violent waves. His spine curved wrong, a sound like something cracking and reforming, fingers elongating, knuckles splitting dark fur through skin in patches, not graceful but frantic, like his body couldn't decide what it was. A guttural growl tore from his throat as the mark fought to keep the wolf caged inside him. He was losing the battle, every muscle straining, every breath a snarl of pain and fury. She dropped her satchel and sank to her knees beside him. Blake. His head snapped toward her, golden eyes locked on hers, wild, desperate, still recognizing her through the haze. He tried to speak. What came out was a broken rasp. Leave, before I... No. She cupped his face with both hands, thumbs stroking his cheekbones. I'm not going anywhere. The growl deepened, but she didn't pull away. Bella slid one hand to the back of his neck and began to sing, soft, steady, the old border lullaby her mother had used on fevered children and wounded animals alike. The thrum in her chest rose like a second heartbeat, warm and bright, pouring through her palms into his skin. She sang the next verse against his temple, voice trembling only slightly. Wolves may howl, winds may cry, but here the shadows sleep. Close your eyes, my wild one, dream of meadows deep. Slowly, agonizingly, the gold bled from his eyes, fur smoothed away like mist at dawn, claws retracted with a soft, painful click. The growl fractured into ragged human breathing. When the shift finished, he was naked, skin flushed and damp, muscles still trembling. He slumped forward, forehead dropping to her shoulder, arms wrapping around her waist on pure instinct. Bella held him without hesitation, one hand cradling the back of his head, the other stroking slow circles between his shoulder blades. Blake lifted his head just enough to meet her eyes. His face was raw with embarrassment, cheeks flushed darker. I didn't mean for you to see that. Bella kept her gaze locked on his face. I haven't looked, she said quietly. And she hadn't. But the heat between them was undeniable, a living current that made her achingly aware of every inch of bare skin pressed against her. He searched her eyes, then exhaled a shaky laugh. You're a terrible liar. I'm an excellent liar, she corrected softly. Just not to you. Something grateful flickered across his face. He reached up, hesitated, then cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed the corner of her mouth. "Thank you," he whispered, "for the song, for staying." She leaned into his touch. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, until he could stand. Bella helped him to the bench, fetched the linen wrap he kept nearby, and turned her back while he covered himself. When she faced him again, he looked steadier, but his eyes still held that lingering warmth. "We need to talk about the counter-rite," he said. "I found references in the restricted archives. There's a way to break the mark completely, but it requires moon ash. It only grows in the eastern border ravines under full moonlight. We have 2 weeks until the next one." Bella's stomach tightened. 2 weeks to get it? He nodded. "The window is narrow. If we miss it, the corruption accelerates. I may not survive another cycle." She met his eyes. "Then we have to get the moon ash. I know the paths. My mother took me there once. I can be in and out before anyone notices." Blake's jaw clenched. "It's too dangerous. The ravines are full of beasts twisted by the same corruption." They stared at each other, the unspoken fear hanging between them. Then he reached for her hand and threaded their fingers. "We'll go together," he said. The following night, Bella was already on her knees before Blake, palms on the mark, when the main door opened without warning. Silk rustled. A cool, cultured voice cut through the quiet. "Blake, darling, I thought I'd find you here. Bathing again?" Princess Callista stepped fully into the candlelight, tall and composed, dark hair coiled in an intricate crown, gown the pale shimmer of winter frost. She stopped short when her gaze landed on Bella's palms, still pressed to the king's bare chest, fingers splayed over the spiral like they belonged there. The silence that followed was so complete, Bella heard her own heartbeat thudding in, her ears. Blake rose in one fluid motion, tugging his tunic closed as he stepped half in front of her. "Callista." Her gaze flicked between them. "I see you've acquired a new attendant." Bella stood slowly, eyes lowered. She felt suddenly, painfully small. "She's a healer," Blake said calmly, "tending an old wound." Callista's smile curved, sharp enough to cut. How thoughtful, and so dedicated, sneaking through servants' passages every night. Her gaze slid to Bella again, cool and appraising. One might almost think there was something more intimate at play. Blake's shoulders tensed. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching over the man I'm to marry." Callista's tone remained light, but her eyes were glacial. "My father writes daily. He asks why our betrothal remains unannounced, why you seem so distracted." The words landed like ice water down Bella's spine. Betrothed. She felt the floor tilt beneath her, felt the thrum in her chest stutter once, hard, before she forced it steady again. The man she had been singing lullabies to, the man whose wolf she had coaxed back from the edge, was promised to a princess. She hadn't known. 7 years in these walls, 7 years of listening at doors, of catching whispers in laundry rooms and kitchens, and she had never once heard the king's name linked to a bride. She had been so careful, so focused on surviving, on keeping her head down, that she had never looked up, never asked, never realized the palace held secrets even bigger than the one she had stumbled into. Blake's jaw tightened. The alliance stands. The wedding proceeds. Callista studied him for a long moment. Then her gaze drifted back to Bella. And the help? Does she understand her place? Bella kept her eyes on the floor, nails biting into her palms. She felt the heat climb her throat, embarrassment, but something sharper beneath it. Humiliation. That she had let herself forget, even for a moment, exactly where she stood in this world. Blake moved, putting himself between Callista's gaze and Bella. His voice dropped, edged with warning. "She understands everything." Callista laughed. "Careful, Blake. My father sees weakness the way wolves scent blood. If you throw away our kingdoms for a servant." She let the sentence trail, unfinished but unmistakable. Then she turned for the door, silk whispering across stone. "Think on it, darling. I'd hate for you to lose everything your mother died to protect." The door closed with a quiet final click. Blake exhaled, shoulders dropping as though the air had been punched from him. He turned to Bella, face tight with regret. "I'm sorry." She lifted her chin, forcing her voice steady even as her chest cracked open. "You never told me." He froze. "Bella, you're betrothed." The words tasted like ash on her tongue. "To a princess." Blake stepped closer, hands hovering near, her arms. "It was arranged when I was 16, before I understood what it meant to be bound to someone I didn't choose. There's no bond between us, Bella. No love, only duty. You don't have to explain." She swallowed the ache in her throat and forced a small, steady smile, the same one she'd worn for years whenever someone reminded her of her place. "It changes nothing. We focus on the plan. Moon ash, the right, getting you free." He searched her face, eyes shadowed with something that looked painfully like guilt. "It changes everything." She blinked hard, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. "It doesn't have to. This is for the best." The lie tasted bitter. She turned away before he could see the truth in her eyes, before he could see how much it hurt to realize she had let herself hope, even a little, that she might belong somewhere other than the shadows. She gathered her satchel with shaking hands, movements precise and mechanical. Behind her. Blake stood silent, watching her go. The door closed softly at her back. In the corridor, alone at last, Bella pressed her palm to the cold stone wall and let one quiet sob escape. Brief, choked, gone, almost before it began. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, straightened her shoulders, and kept walking. This was for the best. He had a kingdom, a duty, a future that didn't include a border healer's daughter who hadn't even known he was promised to someone else. She told herself the ache in her chest would fade. She told herself she had always known this was temporary. None of them felt true. The next night, Bella arrived with her satchel of fresh salve, heart still unsteady from the memory of Callista. She had spent the day moving through chores on autopilot, avoiding Mavis's searching looks, telling herself the ache would dull if she simply kept moving. Blake was waiting on the low marble bench, tunic already open, the mark exposed under the candlelight. He looked up when she entered, and the relief that flickered across his face made her stomach twist. He had been waiting for her. She knelt without preamble, palms finding their familiar place on his ribs. The thrum rose at once, warm and steady, flowing into the spiral. For a long moment there was only the soft sound of their breathing and the faint crackle of wax. Then Blake spoke, voice low and rough, as though the words had been clawing at him for hours. "I can't stop thinking about what you said last night." Bella's fingers stilled for half a heartbeat. She kept her eyes on the mark, tracing the newest red vein with her thumb. "We agreed to focus on the plan." "I know what we agreed." He exhaled, the sound ragged. "But I can't pretend I don't feel this." She swallowed, forcing her hands to keep moving, to keep the thrum flowing. "Blake." "When the rite was performed," he continued, quieter now, "they told me the mark would sever any chance of a true mate bond, that I would rule alone, bound only to the land. I believed them. I accepted it. I told myself it was fair. My mother gave everything so I could carry the kingdom. What right did I have to want more?" His hand came up slowly, covering hers where it rested over the spiral. "Then you walked through that door." His voice cracked, just barely. "And every night since, I felt something wake inside me that I thought was dead. Something that recognizes you, that needs you. I never thought a mate bond was possible, not with this thing eating me from the inside, but I know it now. I know you're meant to be mine." Bella felt his words ripple through her heart, stirring everything she had tried to bury. She wanted to lean into him, wanted to tell him she felt it too, that the thrum inside her sang louder every time he said her name. But the memory of Callista's voice, the man I'm to marry, flashed bright and cold. She pulled her hands back gently, breaking the contact. The thrum stuttered, protesting. "We can't," she said, voice steady even though her throat burned. "The mark is killing you. We have to stay focused. Moon ash. The right. That's what matters." Blake's face crumpled, grief flashing raw across features that usually held so much control. His eyes darkened, shoulders bowing as though the weight of her words had physically struck him. For a heartbeat, he looked lost, like the boy who had watched his mother smile on the altar and then spent 16 years believing he would never be allowed to want anything for himself. Then the mark flared. A violent pulse of red light streaked through the spiral. Blake's body jerked, hard, claws sliding out with a metallic scrape, golden light flooding his eyes. A guttural snarl tore from his throat as the wolf surged, fighting the chains, fighting the pain, fighting everything. Bella moved without thought. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders, pulling him against her, chest, one hand cradling the back of his head. Blake, listen to me." He shuddered violently, face pressing into the curve of her neck, fangs grazing skin in desperate, helpless contact, his arms locked around her waist, crushing her close. She felt every tremor, every frantic beat of his heart slamming against hers. She began to sing, soft, urgent, the same lines from the night before. The thrum surged brighter, pouring through her palms, through her voice, wrapping around him like a blanket. Slowly, agonizingly, the wolf receded. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, hearts beating in ragged unison, until the door burst open. Callista stood framed in the entrance, 2 guards at her back. Her face was pale, eyes glittering with something that looked almost like grief. "So, this is what loyalty looks like," she said softly. Blake stiffened, but his arms remained locked around Bella, tight, protective, unyielding. His voice came out hoarse, wrecked from the episode that had only just released him. "Callista, don't." She stepped forward, silk whispering against marble. The guards stayed where they were, hands resting on sword hilts, eyes fixed ahead as though they could will themselves invisible. Callista's gaze flicked from Blake's face to Bella's, lingering on the way Bella's hands still cradled the back of his neck, on the way their foreheads had been pressed together only moments before. "I believed in us, in the alliance, in the future we could build together, and you throw it away for—" Her eyes slid to Bella again, colder now. "A servant in your arms." "She's under my protection," Blake said, "as royal healer." Callista laughed, cold, broken. "Royal healer, how convenient." She straightened, chin lifting. "My father arrives tomorrow with an escort. He'll want answers. And if you choose her over our kingdoms—" She let the threat hang, eyes shining with unshed tears. "I will not stand in his way." Blake exhaled, shoulders dropping. He rose slowly, pulling Bella up with him, keeping her slightly behind his body, shielding her. His voice was steel. "Then the betrothal is over. Tonight. I will not marry you, Callista. Not when my heart belongs to someone else." Callista's face went white. For the first time, the hurt looked real, unguarded. She pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. "As you wish," she said quietly. "I hope she's worth losing everything for." She turned on her heel, silk swirling, and left. The guards followed without a word. The door closed with a soft final click that seemed to echo in Bella's bones. Blake exhaled again, shoulders bowing as though the weight of the last few minutes had finally settled on him fully. He turned to Bella, face ravaged, eyes dark with grief and certainty. "I choose you," he said simply. Bella's throat closed. She nodded once, unable to speak past the knot of emotion lodged there. Fear, relief, something dangerously close to hope. Blake lifted one hand slowly, as though afraid she might flinch away. His fingertips brushed her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "You shouldn't have said that." Her voice trembled. "Not when the mark is killing you faster every day. You should have waited. You should have—" He leaned in before she could finish, closing the last inch between them. His lips brushed hers once, lingering just long enough for her to feel the warmth of him, the faint tremor in his hand where it cupped her face. It was a promise, quiet, certain, unshakable. "I couldn't wait," he whispered. "Not anymore. If I'm going to lose everything, Bella, I want to lose it knowing I chose you first." She closed her eyes, tears slipping free despite her best efforts. "You're impossible," she breathed, the words half laugh, half sob, trembling against his mouth. Blake's lips curved, just the barest hint of a smile, sad and tender. "I prefer romantic," he murmured, voice low enough that it felt like a secret meant only for the space between them. The next morning, word spread like wildfire through the palace corridors. The king had severed the betrothal. Princess Callista had left at dawn in a carriage flanked by her personal guard, face pale, eyes red-rimmed. Guards whispered of letters sent north to King Demis, urgent, sealed with black wax. Bella stood at the narrow attic window, watching the eastern road where that same carriage had disappeared hours earlier. The sky was pale and cloudless, indifferent to the storm gathering in the kingdom. Mavis came up behind her, footsteps soft on the worn boards. She didn't speak at first, just slipped an arm around Bella's waist and rested her chin on her shoulder. They watched the empty road together in silence for a long moment. Finally, Mavis spoke. "You're shaking again, love." Bella let out a small, broken laugh. "You're too good at this." Mavis squeezed once, protective and warm. "I've had 7 years of practice reading you like a laundry list. Spill or I start guessing, loudly, in the corridor, with hand gestures." Bella turned in her arms, meeting her friend's eyes. "He kissed me," Bella whispered, "after Callista left. After he told her it was over, he said, he knows I'm meant to be his, that the mark was supposed to burn away any chance of a mate bond, but he feels it anyway." Mavis's brows shot up. "I knew it. The way you've been coming back here glowing like a lantern every night." Bella huffed a watery laugh despite herself. "You're silly." "Endearing, you mean." Mavis tucked a loose strand of hair behind Bella's ear, thumb lingering on her cheek. "He chose you, Bella. Over a crown, over an army, over everything." Bella closed her eyes, throat tight. "I know. And you're terrified." Bella nodded, small and helpless. Mavis pulled her into a fierce hug. "Then be terrified, but don't you dare think you're alone in it. I've got your back, love. And if he hurts you, if he so much as thinks about hurting you, I'll march down there, steal his fancy bathwater, and drown him in it. Slowly, with extra bubbles so he goes out fancy." Bella buried her face in Mavis's shoulder. "There'll be an after," Mavis murmured against her hair. "Because you're not letting him die. And he's not letting you go. That's how this ends. You'll see." Bella clung harder. "I hope you're right." Somewhere in the palace below, Blake was preparing for war. The full moon was 4 days away. The moon ash still waited in the border ravine. And King Demis was coming, with questions, with demands, with soldiers at his back. Time had just run out. Bella found Blake in the small antechamber off the east wing, the one with the narrow arrow-slit window that looked out over the eastern border. He stood with his back to the door, shoulders rigid, studying a folded map spread across a low table. The mark on his ribs was visible beneath the open collar of his tunic. The red veins had lengthened overnight, threading toward his heart like cracks in thawing ice. He didn't turn when she entered, but the tension in his frame eased at the sound of her footsteps. "You're early," he said quietly. "I couldn't sleep." Bella closed the door behind her, the latch clicking soft and final. "Mavis caught me packing the satchel. She tried to come with me." Blake exhaled through his nose, a sound that was part laugh, part sigh. "She's a good friend. She still might come if we don't leave soon." Bella crossed to the table, standing beside him. The map showed the border ravines in careful ink, jagged lines of mountains, dotted paths through monster-haunted passes, a single circled hollow where moon ash grew under full moonlight. Blake finally looked at her. The exhaustion carved into his face was deeper now, but his gaze was steady, warm in that quiet way that always made her chest ache. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "With all my heart." Bella reached out, fingertips brushing the newest red vein on his ribs. "We go tonight, before the court notices you're gone, before Demise's scouts reach the gates." He caught her hand, pressed it flat over the mark. "If anything happens to you, you won't let anything happen to me." She met his eyes. "We ride together. We come back together. That's the deal." They left under cover of dusk, cloaked in plain wool, horses saddled from the lesser stables. No banners, no escort, just two shadows slipping through the gate while the watch changed. Mavis had pressed a small knife into Bella's palm before they left, for emergencies, not heroics, and kissed her cheek hard enough to bruise. "Bring him back breathing," she whispered, "or I'll haunt you both." The ride east was brutal. The borderlands had grown wilder since Blake's mark began to fail. Fields that should have been green were black and brittle. Rivers ran sluggish and red-brown, and the air carried the faint, acrid scent of something burning far off. Twice they heard the low, unnatural howl of corrupted beasts in the distance, wolves twisted by the same rot that ate at Blake's ribs. Each time he went still in the saddle, golden light flickering in his eyes, and each time Bella reached across to lay her palm on his forearm until the glow faded. They spoke little on the ride. There wasn't time for much beyond the rhythm of hooves on hard-packed earth, the brush of their knees when the trail narrowed, and the glances they traded whenever one of them caught the other looking. But every time Blake's gaze lingered on her mouth, or Bella's fingers brushed his when passing the waterskin, the air between them thickened like the moment before a storm breaks. On the second night, they made camp in a shallow cave above a dry ravine. No fire, too much risk of drawing eyes, but the waxing moon spilled silver across the rocks, bright enough to see by. He raised his eyes to hers, moonlight turning the amber to molten gold. "Tell me something," he murmured. "When you first saw me, in the bath, did I live up to what you were expecting?" Her cheeks flared hot. I wasn't expecting anything. I was trying not to get killed." A slow, wicked smile curved his mouth, the first real one she'd seen in days. "You looked right at me, Bella. Every inch. Don't pretend you didn't." "I locked my eyes on your face," she insisted, voice breathier than she wanted. "I was very disciplined." He leaned closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "And yet your cheeks are red right now, just remembering it." She tried to pull her hand back. He didn't let her. Instead, he tugged gently, drawing her forward until she was kneeling between his spread thighs, their faces inches apart. "I didn't look," she whispered, but the lie felt thin even to her own ears. Blake's free hand slid to her waist, thumb brushing the underside of her through her shift, deliberate, teasing. "Liar," he breathed against her mouth. I felt your eyes on me. Her breath hitched. She could feel him rising now, pressing against her lower belly through his trousers. The knowledge sent a fresh wave of heat through her, pooling low and insistent. Blake. Her voice was half warning, half plea. He kissed her then, slow at first, lips brushing hers like he was memorizing the shape. Then deeper, hungrier, tongue tracing the seam of her mouth until she opened for him. She made a small, helpless sound against his lips, hands fisting in his tunic. He groaned low in his throat, the sound vibrating through her, and pulled her tighter against him so she could feel exactly how much he wanted her. You're going to kill me before the mark does, he rasped. Bella laughed shakily, cheeks burning. You started it. I did. His thumb stroked her lower lip, eyes dark with hunger. And I'd do it again, every night, every hour, until you stop pretending you don't want the same thing. She swallowed, pulse thundering in her ears. I want it, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I want you so much it scares me. But not here. Not when we might not make it back. Blake exhaled roughly, resting his forehead against hers again. We'll make it back. And when we do, I'm going to take my time with you. Just you and me and every inch of skin I've been dying to touch. She shivered, thighs pressing together instinctively. Promise? He kissed her again. Slow, deep. I swear it on every scar I carry. They broke apart only when the wind carried the distant howl of a corrupted beast. Too close. Blake pulled back, eyes still dark with want, but the moment shifted back to survival. Rest, he murmured, pressing one last kiss to her temple. We ride at first light. They rode into the ravine at dusk on the third day, the full moon already rising fat and silver over the eastern ridge. The air was thick with the scent of iron and wet stone. Twisted vines clung to the walls like veins, pulsing faintly with the same red light that marked Blake's ribs. Somewhere deeper in, a low, unnatural growl rolled across the rocks. Blake dismounted first, sword already drawn. Stay close. Bella slid from her saddle, hand resting on the small satchel at her hip, the one that held the vial for the moon ash, the knife, the strip of clean linen she'd prepared for the rite. They moved on foot now, leading the horses, following the narrow path that hugged the ravine wall. The moon ash grew in a single sheltered hollow at the deepest point, pale, silver-leaved plants that bloomed only under full light. Bella had seen them once as a child, glowing like fallen stars against the dark stone. She remembered her mother's voice. They drink moonlight the way we drink water. Take only what you need. The land remembers greed. They were 20 paces from the hollow when the first arrow struck stone beside Blake's head. He shoved Bella behind a boulder, sword up, body shielding hers. Stay down. More arrows followed, sharp, black-fletched, whistling out of the darkness. Blake yanked her lower as one grazed his shoulder, tearing leather and drawing blood. He didn't flinch. Demise's men, he said, voice low. Callista must have reached him faster than we thought. Bella pressed her palm to the shallow cut on his shoulder. The thrum flared, staunching the blood, but she felt the tremor in him, the mark reacting to the violence, red veins pulsing brighter. We need the ash, she whispered. Now. Just then, Blake surged up, sword flashing silver in the moonlight. The first soldier came at him from the shadows, armored, blade raised. Blake met him with brutal efficiency, parry, twist, strike. The man went down without a sound. Another followed, then another. Blake moved, fluid, relentless, every motion honed by years of war. Bella stayed low, heart hammering, waiting for an opening. When the path cleared for a heartbeat, she darted forward, scrambling over loose rocks toward the hollow. Moonlight poured down, turning the silver leaves incandescent. She dropped to her knees, knife already out, slicing stems with careful precision. 1, 2, 3. Enough for the right. She stuffed them into the vial, hands shaking. Behind her, steel rang against steel. Blake grunted in pain. She spun just in time to see him take a shallow cut across the ribs, blood blooming dark against his tunic. Blake! He drove his attacker back with a savage swing, then glanced at her. Go! I'll hold them! She ran to him instead, ducking under a swinging blade, reaching his side as he parried another strike. Her palm found the mark, thrum surging bright and desperate. The red veins dimmed for a moment, giving him strength. He snarled, wolf deep, and drove his sword through the soldier's guard. More rushed forward. Too many. Then hoofbeats thundered from the ravine mouth. Callista rode at the head of a small company, cloak thrown back, face pale in the moonlight. She reined in hard, eyes finding Blake first, then Bella beside him. Stop! Her voice cracked across the rocks. The soldiers froze. Blake straightened, sword still raised, blood dripping from his side. Bella kept her hand on the mark, thrum steady, holding him upright. Callista dismounted slowly, guards flanking her. She looked smaller here, less princess, more woman caught between duty and something deeper. I didn't want this, she said quietly. I didn't want you dead. I just wanted... She swallowed. I wanted what we were promised. Stability, a throne, a future that made sense. Blake's voice was rough but even. That future was never real, Callista. Not for either of us. I'm sorry. Her eyes flicked to Bella, lingering on the way Bella's hand stayed pressed to his ribs, on the way Blake leaned into her touch without shame. You love her, Callista said. Blake didn't hesitate. Yes. Callista closed her eyes for a heartbeat. When she opened them again, the hurt was still there, but something else had settled over it. Resignation, maybe. Dignity. She looked at Blake, then at Bella, and finally at the moon ash glowing silver in the hollow. Then finish it, she said softly. Before my father's men arrive, before this ravine becomes a grave. Bella's heart stuttered. She searched Callista's face, waiting for the trap, but found only quiet resolve. Blake gave her a small nod, eyes steady. Trust me. She stepped into the center of the hollow where the moon ash grew thickest. She knelt, vial in one hand, knife in the other. Blake moved to stand beside her, sword still drawn but lowered. Callista remained 10 paces away, guards tense but unmoving behind her. Bella sliced her palm, quick, shallow. Blood welled dark and bright. She let it drip onto the moon ash leaves, then pressed her bleeding hand to the mark on Blake's ribs. The thrum roared to life, brighter than it had ever been, golden white light flaring between their joined hands. Visions flashed. The boy on the altar, the mother smiling, the land screaming. But this time the images fractured, resisted. The red veins on Blake's ribs pulsed violently, fighting back. The light flickered, then dimmed. Pain lanced through Bella's palm like fire. She gasped, fingers curling involuntarily. It wasn't working. Blake's breath hitched. Bella! She pressed harder, willing the thrum stronger, but the mark flared red, defiant, hungry. The golden light sputtered, almost guttering out. Callista took one step forward, voice low but clear. Wait. Bella looked up, startled. Callista's eyes were fixed on their joined hands. The rite was never meant to allow a true bond, she said quietly. It was designed to sever them, to chain the king to the land alone. But if your bond is real... She hesitated, then met Blake's gaze. You have to offer it together. Blake stared at her. Callista, if you're going to break it right. She reached into the small pouch at her belt, withdrew a thin silver chain, simple, old, the kind worn under armor. A tiny wolf pendant dangled from it. She stepped forward and placed it in Blake's free hand. My mother gave me this when I was promised to you, she said softly. She said it would remind me that strength isn't in holding power alone. It's in choosing who stands beside you. Her eyes flicked to Bella. Use it. Bind the oath. Let the land see you're not breaking it. You're rewriting it. Blake's fingers closed around the chain. He looked at Callist, and something raw passed between them. Gratitude. Understanding. Thank you, he said quietly. Callista nodded once, then stepped back. Blake turned to Bella. She nodded, tears burning her eyes. He drew his own knife, sliced his palm, pressed it to hers. He looped the silver chain around their joined wrists, the wolf pendant resting against their skin. Then he spoke the words. Low, steady, ancient words he must have carried in memory since the night his mother died. Not one life for the land, 2 lives for each other. We share the burden. We share the strength. We share everything. The thrum exploded, golden white light surging upward in a brilliant column. The mark on Blake's ribs flared violent red one last time, fighting, raging, then shattered like glass under a hammer. Shards of black silver dissolved into the air, carried away on a sudden warm wind. Blake gasped, head falling forward. Bella caught him, arms wrapping tight around his shoulders. He shuddered once, hard, then stilled. The red veins were gone. Only smooth skin remained, warm and whole. The ravine went silent. Then the land answered. A low rumble rolled through the stone, gentle, alive. Vines that had been black and brittle began to green before their eyes. The red in the distant river faded to clear silver. Somewhere far off, corrupted howls turned to ordinary wolf song, wild, free, no longer twisted. Callista exhaled, a sound caught between grief and wonder. She looked at Blake, at Bella, at their joined hands, the silver chain still looped around their wrists, blood drying to rust. You did it, she said quietly. Blake lifted his head. Callista. She shook her head. Don't say anything, just be happy. Both of you. She brushed dust from her gown and looked at him one last time. And thank you for letting me see what real strength looks like. She turned, mounted her horse, and rode out with her guards, head high, back straight, wounded dignity intact. Blake watched her go until the dust settled. Then he turned to Bella, forehead resting against hers. She helped us, he said quietly. After everything, I owe her more than I can ever repay. Bella cupped his face. You can repay her by making the kingdom better, by ending the rights forever. He nodded, eyes shining. I will. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breaths mingling, until the first green shoots began to push through the cracked earth around them, curling toward the moonlight like they'd been waiting years to breathe. They reached the palace at dusk on the 4th day. The gates opened without question. Word of the healed land had traveled faster than they had. Guards bowed low, courtiers stared. Blake ignored them all, hand firm around Bella's as he led her through corridors that suddenly felt too grand, too cold, after the raw intimacy of the ravine. He took her, straight to his private chambers, the quiet suite overlooking the western gardens. Blake turned to her, eyes dark with everything he'd held back on the road. I kept my promise, he said quietly. We made it back. Bella stepped into him, palms sliding up his chest. You did. He caught her wrist gently, brought her hands to his mouth, kissed each palm. I want you, he murmured against her skin. Not because the bond demands it, not because the kingdom expects it, but because I've wanted you since you walked in on me. He kissed her then, slow, deep, deliberate. His hands moved to the laces of her riding tunic, untying them with careful fingers, peeling the fabric away until she stood in nothing but her shift. He stepped back just enough to look at her, eyes tracing every curve, every scar, every inch he'd memorized in stolen touches. You're beautiful, he breathed. Every part of you. She flushed under his gaze, suddenly shy despite everything. Blake. He caught her chin, tilted her face up. I've dreamed of this, he said roughly, of seeing you like this, of touching you without fear, of feeling you around me. He backed her toward the bed, slow steps, mouths never parting, until her calves hit the edge. She sank down, pulling him with her. His weight settled over her, heavy and perfect, and she felt him, pressing insistently against her thigh. Her eyes widened slightly. He huffed a soft laugh against her throat. I've been hard for you since the first night you touched the mark. It's only gotten worse. She reached between them, palmed him through the fabric. He groaned low in his chest, hips rocking into her hand. He was even more than she'd expected. Heat flooded her core at the feel of him, at the way he throbbed under her touch. Careful, he rasped, catching her wrist. Or this will be over before it starts. She smiled against his mouth. He stripped the rest of his clothes with quick, impatient movements, then helped her out of her shift. When they were both bare, he paused again, looking down at her. I want to taste you first, he said, voice rough. I want to know what you sound like when you come apart from me. Before she could answer, he slid down her body, shoulders spreading her thighs, mouth finding her in one long, slow lick that made her arch off the bed with a broken cry. He didn't tease. He devoured, tongue circling, lips sucking, fingers sliding inside her to curl just right. Her thighs clamped around his head, fingers tangled in his hair, his name torn from her throat. When the aftershocks faded, he crawled back up, kissing her deeply. Now, he murmured against her lips, now I need to be inside you, if you'll have me. She nodded, legs wrapping around his hips. He notched himself at her entrance, slow, careful, and pushed in. Bella gasped at the stretch, the way he filled her so completely she could feel every ridge, every pulse. He groaned low in his throat, forehead dropping to hers, arms trembling with restraint. Gods, Bella, he breathed. You feel... He didn't finish, just rocked deeper, slow and steady, until he was seated to the hilt. They both stilled, breathing hard, savoring the connection, the bond humming bright and golden between them, wrapping around every sensation. Then he moved. Slow at first, long, deliberate strokes that made her toes curl, then faster, harder, hips snapping against hers, the bed creaking under them. She met every thrust, nails raking down his back, legs locked tight around him. He buried his face in her neck, fangs grazing her skin. When she came again, it was shattering, back arching, vision whiting out. He followed seconds later, hips stuttering, spilling inside her with a broken groan that vibrated through her bones. They collapsed together, sweat slick and trembling, his weight a perfect blanket over her. He pressed, soft, open-mouth kisses along her throat, her jaw, her temple. I love you, he whispered against her skin. I should have said it sooner. She turned her head, found his mouth. I love you too. They stayed tangled like that until their breathing slowed, until the moonlight shifted across the bed. Eventually, he rolled to his side, pulling her against his chest, hands splaying protectively over her chest. Months later, the bathing chamber looked different in daylight. Curtains drawn back, sunlight pouring across marble, turning the copper tub to molten gold. Blake stood behind Bella at the window, arms wrapped around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. His hand splayed gently over the small swell of her belly. The mark was gone. Only smooth skin remained where the spiral had been. His wolf was free now, golden eyes calm, strength steady, no more feral flashes. Mavis burst through the door without knocking, carrying a basket of fresh linens and grinning like she'd won a bet. Look at the pair of you, still canoodling in the bath chamber where it all started, Some of us have work to do, you know? Bella laughed, turning in Blake's arms. You came? Of course. Mavis set the basket down and crossed to them, eyes soft. Had to see if the wrong door really did lead to the right man. Blake's mouth curved. It did. Mavis looked between them, Bella glowing, Blake steady, the quiet joy that filled the room like sunlight. She reached out, squeezed Bella's hand. You scared me for a while there, she said softly. Both of you. Bella squeezed back. We're safe now. Mavis nodded, then glanced at Blake with mock severity. You keep her safe, Your Majesty, or I'll still drown you in your own bathwater. Extra bubbles. Blake laughed, low, warm, the sound of a man finally free. Noted? Mavis winked at Bella, then slipped out, leaving them alone in the sunlight. Blake turned Bella in his arms, hands framing her face. I still dream about that first night sometimes, he murmured, the way you looked at me and didn't run. Bella smiled, tracing the place where the mark had been. I still dream about it too, about the boy who lost everything and kept going anyway. He leaned down, kissed the faint scar on her palm, the one from the right, now faded to silver. You chose me knowing the cost. And you chose me over everything. She rose on her toes, brushed her lips against his. Outside, the kingdom was whole again. Crops green, rivers clear, borders quiet, laws rewritten, blood rights forbidden forever. And in the north, word had reached Callista's new estate, a quiet gift from the king, a sealed letter granting her lands independent of her father's rule, a generous dowry she could use as she wished, and a personal note from Blake himself. You gave us the chain that bound us together when everything else tried to tear us apart. The kingdom owes you more than gratitude. I owe you more than words. Be well, Callista. Be free. If you ever need anything, the gates of Valdenmere will open for you. She had read it once, folded it carefully, then she had walked out into her gardens that were hers alone, and let herself smile for the first time in months. Miles away, inside the bathing chamber, Bella and Blake stood wrapped in each other, the wrong door long forgotten, the right one finally open, and the future stretched bright and endless before them. Can you rate this from 1 to 10? I love hearing your feedback, and if you'd like to support me, please like and subscribe. It helps more people find this story.